What's happening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mutant Mondays, a series where we celebrate everything X-related. Now, disclaimer, I'm going to need you all to hold on to your butts, because this is going to be a bit of a bumpy ride as I present to you a sort of ultimate what-if scenario, a thought experiment, if you will. What if the X-Men never came back? So, hopping the Wayback Machine, going back to 1970. X-Men rolling on for 66 issues at this point. Litany of creators: Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Ross Andrew for a little bit, who I think has always been under-celebrated. Jim Steranko, Roy Thomas, Don Heck, Gary Friedrich, and again, a whole list of just talented and popular and creative individuals working on this title, working to just create tons of stories and introducing tons of characters. Obviously, the X-Men, Professor X, Magneto, Blob, the brother of the Evil Mutants, and Sunfire right before the soft cancellation, which I will call it just for the sake of this video. So 1970, 66 issues have run through all new material, but sales aren't hitting the way that they like. So for the next 5 years until 1975, the series is all reprints. Now, effectively, they have been canceled, but I call it a soft cancellation because the series was still being published. Like, the book was still being published, but just reprints for those 5 so years, just under 30 issues. And then 1975, Lynn Wein, Dave Cockrum, two fantastic creators, rest in peace both of them, come back with Giant Size X-Men #1, all new, all different team. We got Cyclops from the original team, Wolverine, who we saw debuted in Incredible Hulk 180 and 181, Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Thunderbird, Banshee, and these characters became the new X-Men, the all new, all different X-Men. And from there on, with Chris Claremont in issue 94 on through 100 something, whatever, it's like, again, this wildly creative run which endured the X-Men to a whole lot of fans out there. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to talk about what would happen if that never happened, if it was never relaunched and they said, you know what, maybe even at the end of that 5-year run of reprints, or even before, or even they just outright canceled it without the reprints and just said, you know, we're just cutting it off right here. What would the comic landscape look like, the Marvel Universe, and just comic publishing as a whole without that Texas-sized gap? Because I'm not talking about, okay, so it's 2021 and you just go back and erase the X-Men from their publishing slate and from the collective minds of everyone in the world, but it just ended right there. Like, you can look back at a lot of characters and stories and just teams from Silver Age, Golden Age, even Bronze Age. Like, they just disappeared. Like, there's a lot of characters and teams who still exist in comic book limbo. They're like, hey, whatever happened to? There was just a lot of stuff, a lot of one-off hero, like mostly villains, like just random creatures and monsters. It was like, oh, just needed some fodder for heroes to overcome as they kind of progressed. But the X-Men were very close to being part of that group in comic book limbo and just not existing anymore, and it would just be gone. So all this, nope, all this, not a chance. So that's what I was like, oh, you know, this could be a fun thought experiment, and I want to get all of your feedback and just kind of wild ideas, like no matter how wild, like what would comics look like without the X-Men? So just imagine, and then you think about all the creators involved, like that work is gone. Just Chris Claremont, Lynn Wein, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, all these excellent creative runs. So just from the creator standpoint, like their work and bibliographies are just gone. They don't exist anymore. The characters and the stories, all the space stuff, like Phoenix Saga, who are those? Starjammers, Imperial Guard, the Hellfire Club, which obviously all that stuff was magnificent. Inner Circle, Days of Future Past, just gone. And everything afterwards, not a chance. All the spin-off stuff, none of that happens. All the, like, just think about, we were lost out on Jim Lee's work And again, this just from the creator's perspective, all the people do come to endear. Like a lot of creators that I grew up with, like as I said, Jim Lee, Chris Claremont, somebody who's writing still, the Kubert brothers working on X-Men, Mark Silvestri, and just so many characters. Omega Red, just as far as character stuff, like just telling like all that would just be gone. Animated series, and no more. That's just all gone. It's just wild to think about what would comics look like without that. And pivoting from the creator side to the actual fictional world, now you have to remember also before they even hit reprints, they were planted firmly within the Marvel Universe. We've already seen crossovers with Spider-Man, Hulk, the Avengers, all of these, like they already exist there. It's not when we look at like the MCU now, I think everybody's kind of predicting how the X-Men would be introduced. Like they were already there, and like mutants are established, so now they just disappear. Like X-Men just disappear. I do think even if the X-Men disappeared, it was like, oh, like, you know, just cancel, no reprints, none of this is just done. I do think the mutants will still existed within the fictional space, but just kind of, again, just in limbo. And could they even, you could potentially see them, hey, you know what, they could just come back at some point, but in a wildly different scenario or role and space within the greater Marvel universe that would just be just kind of one of those forgotten aspects. And I think that's even more likely, like, you know, this didn't work out, so they're just going to be shelved. But then, so let's say they get shelved, 1970, like, all right, we're done. I honestly think, like, that decade, out of there for that decade, and the way that comics were in the 90s, I think there's a potential that I could see them having been reintroduced in, but it would have been interesting to see. Like, I want to see like another universe where that actually happened, but keep it far away because I don't want any part of that world where the X-Men don't like have a substantial part of it. But I also think within outside of just the fictional world, just within publishing, because as I've talked about several times in many videos before, I think the X-Men, if you look at the 90s in comics, and we all know it was a wild time, and it was Wild West and comics in the 90s, for comics in the 90s, but I think that, at least specifically with Marvel, I think the X-Men fared the best out of everyone, because you look at just a lot of the Clone Saga was absolute madness, and so many people hated Spider-Man for that in Marvel. But like where everything was going on with the Avengers and Cap Wolf and the stupid armor, and Daredevil had his armor, which I think I actually dug that. I think just for like a design standpoint, I think it was cool armor, and just tons of all this stuff. Everything's extreme, but you just look at a lot of stuff in X-Men, like they were killing it with X-overs and tons of cool characters and a lot of wild stuff. Obviously, we're talking about patches and not patches, but pouches and shoulder pads, knee pads, and just all these giant accessories for absolutely no reason, just for the sake of excess. But there was a lot of cool stuff that the X-Men did, and they didn't get weird until you talk about Uncanny XMen going into the 400s. There was a bit there with Chuck Austin's run, which was kind of weird. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be like real delicate about this, so I don't want to linger on this, but like, they just did some weird shit. Let's just say that Chuck Austin did some weird shit with the X-Men, and his run is not remembered fondly by most fans that I've ever come across or read comments from online. So we'll just leave it at that. So, but that was way later in that, and you're talking about after 2000. So again, X-Men, they rocked the 90s. They did well. So, but just think about it again, and I want you all to chime in and share some of your thoughts on what it would have looked like. How do you think, like, what do you think would have happened to these teams and these characters if the X-Men like officially got full like cancel, like, hey, we're shutting this off, we're done? Because you can think about a lot of series like Incredible Hulk. He had his, what was it, 6 or 10 issues, and then it changed over, and then it kind of brought back. And so, like, there's plenty of other stuff. Like, even every title had some form of reprint, just because they're just like, oh, bringing back these old stories and reprint them in either specials, giant size issues, annuals. So a lot of those, not a lot, but some of those early issues of those were reprints. I think of Captain America, was it Captain America Special #2? I have one of those. Maybe it's #1. I think it was Captain America Special. Like, that was reprint. So there's, like, that wasn't exactly unheard of, but for the series like the X-Men did to run 5 years of reprints is wild. And you'd have to actually look at the published, like the actual individual issues to see it, because they were just kind of all over the place too. Because you imagine, all right, so it ran 66 issues, and then you're gonna do roughly what, not even like 26, 27-ish episode, or not episode, 26, 27 issues of reprints for 5 years. And imagine they're just kind of bouncing around. Like, what was even the decision? Like, how do you even decide what to do there instead of doing it straight through? Like, I don't understand that. So I'd be curious to like have been in the meeting, like been in the offices with them as they're making those decisions for all of that. But again, just a fun idea, and I just wanted to present all of you with this fun little thought experiment and like how the comics landscape, Marvel's publishing, because that would have just been a huge section. Well, I can't even think about it like that, because it would just cease to exist. So it wouldn't have been like, oh, you go back and it just disappeared, but instead it just never happened. So again, I don't know, just share your thoughts in the comments below. Just something fun to think about, and just all the wild scenarios that could have happened within the Marvel Universe, and all the different characters and all these creators who just became popular and made their names with their work on X-Men. John Byrne, Chris Claremont, Len Wein, and Dave Cockrum especially, Terry Austin as well. Just some popular, like wildly popular names. I also forgot Marie Severin did some X-Men work as well. Another under-celebrated name within the comics world. So, and just a lot of people who are no longer with us. Rest in peace to all of them, but we still celebrate them in some form or fashion. So yeah, just share your thoughts. Just thought this would be fun. And yeah, just want to see what kind of wild scenarios that some of you kind of think up and share with us. So yeah, share your thoughts in the comments below. Happy reading, happy hunting, happy collecting. This is GENOTHADRAGON. Thanks for watching, and peace out.